Welcome back to Buckeye Bigfoot. Hey everyone, it's time to announce the winner for July's giveaway, and the winner is Mark B. Mark B, please check your email because you're the winner of this month's stainless steel travel mug. And if you would like to win one, don't forget, head on over to the website at www.buckeyebigfoot.com. Click on the subscribe button in the menu bar, and once you do, you're signed up every month for a free giveaway. Also, I want to apologize. Last week I said we were going to put polls up on the website, and I haven't been able to do that. It turns out I have to install a separate app on the website for that, and I haven't been able to do that. I'm sorry. I've been working overtime unexpectedly at my job this week, but I hope to get those up soon. Now, on to this week's encounter. This comes to us from Paul, who lives in Belmont County. I had never thought much about Bigfoot, although I had seen a few documentaries and a couple episodes of that reality show that went looking for him. It wasn't that I didn't believe, but I just wasn't a believer, you know? Well, all of that changed for me back in 2012. I was out on the back deck of my house, tending to the smoker that I had started earlier that morning. My wife's parents were coming for dinner that night, so I had a pork shoulder and 2 racks of ribs going. Now, me and my father-in-law have a good-natured rivalry about the whole grilling and smoking thing, about who does it better. So yes, I did. I hovered over that smoker on and off through the day, and I was adding wood chips when needed, adjusting the vents, checking the meat obsessively every hour or so. I had to show the old man up, you know? It was a nice day for mid-October. It was sunny, and while not warm, it was balmy in the late 60s. I was sitting at the outdoor table with my back against the house, reading on my Kindle e-reader to pass the time. The smoker sat along the deck railing opposite from me, but just a little to the right of where I was sitting, giving me a clear view across the flat, grassy area of our property and beyond to where the land began a gradual incline up a wooded slope, which was also part of our land, I should add. Now, we had lived there for a little over 17 years, so I knew the view from that deck during all 4 seasons very well. Whether it was the light green of the new leaves coming out from the trees in the spring, what it looked like with the dark green canopy throughout the summer, or the amazing autumn colors, or the white blanket snow of winter. I knew how that slope looked, and I could almost draw a map from memory of where every tree stood in the main view from the deck. I especially loved the autumn colors of the wooded hillside. But that year, there just hadn't been much of a display of color. Instead, it seemed that the leaves had skipped the whole autumn thing and instead turned brown and curled up almost overnight, and by that day, only a few lone clumps of leaves still clung to any of the trees on the hillside, giving me a rare, clear view straight through the skeletons of the bare tree trunks all the way to the top of the slope and the nothingness of the sky beyond it. Now, I had probably raised my gaze to look over at the smoker and back down to my Kindle dozens of times as I had been sitting out there that day. But this time, something was different, and my eyes came to a halt halfway between the smoker and my e-reader. There was a large, dark lump out on the slope. I looked at it. It was not the flat-topped angle of a tree stump, and it was wider than any tree stump that was out there. It was also a lot darker, whereas the trees themselves appeared more of a weathered mid-brown color. This was much darker and looked a hair away from black to me from that distance. It stuck out on the hillside. I watched the dark lump for a moment, trying to reason out what it was. After a few minutes it hadn't moved, so I didn't think it was an animal. And while there had been issues with people illegally dumping things, that was mostly along the rural road out front, or maybe at the back edge of our property beyond that hill. I was still looking at that dark lump when my wife, Kim, popped out onto the deck to check on me and see if I needed anything. I pointed out the dark lump to her, and she had no idea what it might be either. We talked for a few minutes about other things, and she went back inside. But I kept checking that dark lump on the hillside. It still hadn't moved. So I told myself it was nothing, and it's probably just something I had never noticed in the millions of times I had looked out there, and I went back to my reading. But my mind wouldn't let it go. I kept raising my gaze to look out onto the hillside, each time my eyes searching out for that dark shape. There was just something about it that was really bothering me. After another half hour or more of my mind wandering away from my reading to think about the dark lump, in exasperation I put my Kindle down and decided that if I didn't go prove to my brain that it was nothing more than a big tree stump or some clump of debris, well, my mind was not going to shut up about it. I got up and walked across the yard, keeping my eyes on the dark lump. I remember my brain was going through a process of throwing out ideas one after another of what it might be, and also simultaneously my brain was immediately shooting them down. It was thinking things like, maybe it was an injured bear, and then it would say, no, an injured bear would more likely be spread out and lying down. It wouldn't be so vertical and rounded looking. Or maybe it would say, hey, maybe it was a tree that just freshly fell. And then it would round off with, but no, there weren't any trees that big in circumference, and if there had been, it would have taken a lot to break it off at that height and leave a massive stump that size. And besides, hey, did you notice? There's no fallen tree on the ground anywhere near it. So that's how my thoughts went as I walked across the yard. One side of my brain throwing out possibilities, while the other side of my brain was knocking them down as fast as I could toss them out. Now, my mind was still doing its weird idea-tossing and batting cage thing, trespassing on my land, and that meant I could be in a very dangerous situation. But even from 60 feet away on a slope, I instantly knew that no human is that tall or that large, and a hunter trespassing wouldn't have been likely to sit still for the better part of an hour just watching me and my house. I also, my brain realized, didn't see a gun. Furthermore, my brain threw out the logic that a ghillie suit for fall hunting isn't likely to be a color just on the brown side of black that stands out against the autumn landscape as starkly as it had to me as I sat all the way on my back deck. 100 thoughts came and went in my mind in the space of that second and a half that I looked at the creature before it turned and walked up and over the slope and out of my sight. I stood there, my jaw agape, watching the powerful and fast walk up the slope, and my mind just went blank trying to think of a creature that could do such a thing so fluidly and quickly. It was completely effortless as it glided to the top of the slope. I probably stood there a full 5 seconds or more after it had passed out of my sight. I was unsettled and maybe in a bit of shock. I returned to the deck, the feeling of unease growing. When Kim came out on the deck a few minutes later, I told her what had just happened. I didn't make the connection that it could have been a Bigfoot, but she did. And she then told me that her parents had seen a Bigfoot many years ago. Now this surprised me because in all these years, I had never heard that story from either my wife or my in-laws. But then I thought about it. How likely was I to tell anyone what I had seen today? I told Kim I'd like to keep this just between us, and I thought that would be the end of it. But still, I kept looking at the slope across the way for the rest of the afternoon. When my in-laws arrived for dinner that evening, we sat down to dinner, and against my wishes, Kim soon began telling her parents about what I had seen that afternoon. Now, I was expecting ridicule from my in-laws, but instead, they told me all about their own encounter from back in the early 1970s. At the time, my mother-in-law was pregnant with my wife's younger brother, and my wife was then 2 years old. My mother-in-law said she was hanging laundry outside and had put Kim and Peaches, their tiny Chihuahua mixed dog, together in a playpen under the sheet about 15 feet from where she was hanging the laundry on a line. It was close enough that she could talk to Kim and keep her from running off while she wasn't looking. Now, Kim was babbling nonstop, as 2-year-olds often do, and my mother-in-law says she remembers talking back to Kim in that same nonsensical conversation style that adults do with little children that are talking nonsense. When suddenly Peaches began howling and yipping as if in great distress or pain. Now this alarmed my mother-in-law because it was very different from anything she had ever heard from her dog in the 6 years they had had her. She quickly stepped around the hanging laundry so the playpen under the tree was in full view. She said she saw Kim was still babbling, but wasn't looking at her, but rather in the opposite direction from her in the clothesline. My mother-in-law followed Kim's gaze and saw a large, hulking creature standing next to the next closest tree from where the playpen stood, maybe 20 or 25 feet away. My mother-in-law said what chilled her was she could see that the creature seemed to be focused solely on Kim. My mother-in-law started screaming and running toward the playpen, and she said as soon as she began yelling, the creature turned and ran further back into the trees. Now, as soon as they had enough money, my in-laws moved the following spring, and according to my mother-in-law, after that day, she never again hung laundry outside the house unless my father-in-law was home and outside with her. She also never took Kim or Peaches out to the backyard ever again. My father-in-law said he also had a sighting a few years after that, but like me, it was at a distance and brief. Now, my wife has no memory of her encounter as a child, but she does believe her mother's version of it. And, you know, after knowing my in-laws for almost 20 years, I do too. Now, the next day, my father-in-law came back over, and together we walked the hillside, but we didn't find anything. But as neither of us are trained trackers or hunters, there's a possibility we could have missed something. You know, since that day, we've all talked it over, and we wonder, maybe it was the smell of the smoked pork that caught the creature's attention. Or maybe it was just curious about what I was doing out there on the deck. None of us seem to know. Oddly, I didn't and I don't feel threatened by it. And as long as it's peaceful, Kim and I have decided it's welcome on our land. Through all 4 seasons, I have kept looking for it, but I've never seen it since. All right, folks, that's this week's encounter. So tell me what you think. What was it doing out there on the hillside? Do you think it was just curious? Was it scoping the house out? I don't know. You guys tell me. Give me your perspective, which of course, I always see some that surprise me. If you like what you've heard and would like to hear more, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget the bell for notifications. All right, folks, I'm Nance Warren, and I'll be putting the sass into Sasquatch until we meet up again next Friday. And as always, just remember, as you walk the Bigfoot game trail looking for research and evidence, never forget that absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend.